Well, I certainly didn't expect to be sat here on Wednesday morning reflecting on the news that broke yesterday of Johannes Hoff Thorup being sacked by Norwich City. 24 hours ago, Chris and I had just filmed the TNC podcast that now won't be released because most of it's complete nonsense because of the change of proceedings at the football club, and we sat down and we reflected on the horrible defeats to Portsmouth and Millwall and said, like, we're in relegation form and the players should hang their heads in shame, and we are on a very concerning run that is figureheaded by Johannes Hoff Thorup. But I still have the complete belief that he would be given the summer, he would be given a chunk of next season to try and turn things around. I was of the belief that I think most of this falls on the players, that he has a lot of players within that squad that don't necessarily want to be there, that don't really see eye to eye with him, and that will probably be shifted in the summer anyway. And the summer felt huge, and there was no guarantee that it would work next season under Johannes Hoff Thorup. And to hold my hands up and to try and go back to some of those that were saying to me, well, Jack, give me some proof, give me some idea as to why you think this will turn around under Johannes Hoff Thorup. I didn't really have an argument. I didn't have an argument because I couldn't really see any players that had been progressed under Johannes. Maybe Kellen Fisher, that's the only one that kind of comes into my mind. I don't think anyone has been pushed forwards under Johannes. Maybe Emi Marcondes you could add to that list, who's been pretty solid for the most part, but that could well be his level. It's his first season at the football club, and for a quarter of the season, which it has been now, we have been the worst team in the division. If there were another 4 or 5 football matches this season, we would be in a relegation scrap, and I know we're not, and there isn't another 4 or 5 games, but they will be looking at that and the run of form and the inability to just halt that and find a way through and transition, and that was obviously a huge concern. I'm sad. I'm sad about the news. I think with a lot of managerial kind of sackings over the past, managers that I've really liked, whether it's Alex Neil who gained promotion with Norwich City, obviously Daniel Farke who picked up 2 championship titles with us. It's kind of been expected. Like, it's either been in a Premier League season where we're just getting thumped every week and it's been leading to that point and there's been lots of chatter, or it's just been very obvious. David Wagner felt like he'd kind of taken us as far as he could. So I can't really recall a managerial sacking in my lifetime that's come as much of a shock as this one. There was no real chatter. Yes, fans had probably turned. Not all fans, but certainly that away following at Millwall looked pretty brutal, and the Barclay on Good Friday wasn't a particularly pleasant place to be. But I think the general consensus was that he would be given the summer. That's certainly what I was hearing from those involved at the football club. That's certainly what I was hearing from the guys at the BBC and the Pinken, and this really did come as a surprise. I thought that we were in with Johannes for the long run, him and Glenn Riddlesome. This was the start of a new era under Ben Napper and under Norfolk Holdings Group. This was the man that they selected. Yes, Ben Napper had sacked David Wagner previous to this, but he wasn't his man. He was a Stuart Webber selection. This was Ben Napper's selection. This was a recruitment period completely armed around the football that Johannes wanted to play, and that felt like that would take time, that would take energy, and that would take patience. And to sack him 44 games into a championship season does feel, I think on the surface, somewhat premature. Equally, with the points already alluded to in this video so far, the form was woeful, player development was stalled, and it was clear that there was a mismatch in kind of communication from top level, Zoe Webber, Atanasio's, Ben Napper, to Johannes. I thought, and I've mentioned it a few times now on the various bits of content, I thought the really telling point, and I think one that we'll look back on now with a bit more clarity now that we've understood a little bit more of the picture, was that interview from Chris Gorham with Johannes after the Portsmouth game, where Chris raised the point made by Zoe Webber in the programme notes that day, that she felt that we had failed on our targets this season, and the target being the top 6. And Johannes's response was strange. It was like, well, I don't think that was the target. I think we've not necessarily made the targets this season, but I don't think we've failed. There's been a lot of transition. There's been a lot of change. I've had a lot to deal with. And we are where we are. And that moment kind of made me gasp a little bit. I thought, okay, so you've got essentially your paymasters and the people making the decisions thinking one thing and your head coach thinking another. There's clear misalignment there, and it's not like we're 2 weeks into a season and we're trying to hash out what the targets look like for a season. We are basically at the end, and we know roughly where we're going to finish now. Below mid-table, not relegated, not promoted. That lack of communication line was a concern. I think we look back to moments through this season. I think that the disciplining of Shane Duffy and Jose Cordoba won't have gone down well with some other senior players in that dressing room. I suspect, and this isn't me kind of quoting anyone here, but when you've got a new, fresh, young manager disciplining senior players for arguably fairly minor things, being late to team meetings, I think was the reason for both of those. Shane Duffy said he was caught in traffic. Jose Cordoba did have a great excuse, sleeping in, but to publicly kind of out them and discipline them was a route that he chose and went down, and I think that works as long as you're getting results on the pitch and things are going well. But when you're doing that coupled with results not going your way, and it was going to be a difficult road for Johannes to kind of walk. My opinion throughout all of this was like, let's just get to the summer, let's completely rip up the squad, let's go again, and let's see if he's able to coach aside with a couple, another transfer window in the bag, a few more of those legacy players shifted on, the likes of Sorensen, Hernandez, et al. But he won't be given that chance. And I think now that the dust has settled a little bit more, I was shocked yesterday, and I'm not going to say I was upset by the news. I liked Johannes, I liked Glenn Riddlesholm, I liked what we were trying to do, but ultimately over the past 6 weeks, 2 months, it has been really poor. The performance to Portsmouth was one of the worst I've seen at Carrow Road in a very, very long time. I think you probably do have to go back to that 08-09 period where Norwich got relegated from the Championship to recall a defensive performance in the second tier quite that bad. We were going away from home every week knowing that we would lose. Millwall, Plymouth, Burnley, we completely just came to a halt in terms of the football that we were trying to play, and that was a huge concern. There are always moments, aren't there? And I remember it vividly under Alex Neil when we went to Newcastle and got absolutely thumped, and quickly after that he reverted to a style of football that we weren't used to under Alex Neil, and it was kind of curtains from that point. I think we've seen it under Johannes. Although we won, that West Brom performance was pretty dire. The Burnley away game was a complete horror show in terms of what we did on that night compared to what we were trying to do at the start of the season. It was small moments. I think all of the fine margins went against Johannes. I think he's had a couple of injury crises this season to contend with, which has been really difficult. He's had the injuries to Josh Sargent. He's had the suspensions to Boris Science and Kenny McLean. Like, just as you think things are starting to turn, something else would happen. And you can only take so many of those right hooks in a season where there is so much change already before things start to pile up. I look back to Daniel Farke's era, and you obviously remember the first season. It was pretty poor. We lost 5-1 on the final day against Sheffield Wednesday. James Maddison went off in crutches. If that injury was worse and we couldn't sell him, Norwich was staring a really bleak financial situation in the face. The following season didn't start incredibly quickly. We'd signed Jordan Rhodes, we'd signed Timu Pukki. Pukki wasn't even meant to be the main man. I think it was kind of meant to be Jordan Rhodes. Pukki had a chance through the middle. It went well for him. We went to Portman Road. We didn't play great. Max Aarons made his debut. We probably should have lost that day. I think if we had have lost that day, Daniel Farke would have been sacked. He won that day. Norwich went on an incredible run. The rest is history. So there are always moments you can look at in 10 years where you go, oh my goodness, like what an incredible bit of luck, or oh, how did that go so wrong? And unfortunately, in Johannes' era, it was, oh, that's unlucky. That's a bad break. There were points in that early stage of the season. I remember those kind of early, late summer, early autumn games against Hull and against Watford and Luton, when Norwich looked really good. We were blowing teams away at Carrow Road, and at that point, I'm going, okay, we've progressed really quickly here, and we're winning games, and we're definitely in a top 6 race. And from that point on, it just never really kicked on. There were kind of little moments. I remember being at Vicarage Road after beating Watford, and there was a good feeling in the away end that day. Norwich kind of ground out a really scrappy 1-0 win. It wasn't particularly pleasant, and we were against 10 men that day, but I think that put us 2 points off the top 6. We then had Derby and Oxford and Preston at home following that, and we didn't win a single one. That felt like a big moment. I think, had Jack Stacey not decided to kick someone in the head in the 93rd minute and we'd beaten Derby and then we'd come past Oxford, who knows what could have happened. But that's all history now, and realistically won't count for anything. This era for Johannes has been short-lived. It's been, according to Zoe Webber, a bit of a failure in terms of where we were looking to get to. I feel somewhat sorry for Johannes. I think he was dealt a pretty tough hand. Equally, some will say, well, Jack, he had Josh Sargent and Borja Science, and he spent a combined £15 million on Ante Cianats and Mate Jurisic. And look, I think I'm feeling somewhat excited now for what the future holds, and there will be lots of content on TNC over the coming weeks about what the future now looks like. Jack Wilshere will take immediate charge, and that will bring eyeballs and headlines because of the name that he is, and that's going to be fascinating to see how that goes. He will definitely be given the Middlesbrough and the Cardiff game. He has said publicly, very publicly, that he wants to be a head coach, and I suspect that if Norwich don't opt to go with Jack Wilshere, then he may think that his future lies elsewhere. That's completely speculative, but he is an ambitious young man, and he is wanting to become a head coach at a football club. And if he's been at Norwich for a year and not given that opportunity, then he might want to go elsewhere. I don't think he would be my natural number one selection. I think we need someone with a little bit more experience. We definitely need to keep with that playing style that Johannes had implemented, because so much of our recruitment already has been around that. I look at Forster Mankler, Oscar Schwartau, Ante Cianats, Mate Jurisic, like considerable money, Jose Cordoba, Jacob Wright, considerable money and time has been spent on recruiting for that system. You can't now rip it up and go for a Sean Dyche. Not that famous last words, not that I think we will, but we cannot do that. The name at the top of the list, and one that I would be very happy to see at the football club again, is Russell Martin. I don't think that's as straightforward as some are making out. I don't think there was any love lost between the two parties when they went their separate ways. But we will see. It's going to be a fascinating few weeks. I expect to now see an uptick in performance levels. If I were Borough and Cardiff, I'd be slightly less confident than I was 24 hours ago. But these things happen in football. It hasn't worked out in the Johannes Hoff Thorup. I really thought it would. The early signs were good. Even the signs 2 months ago were good. But the run over the past 12 games has been the worst in the division. And that's not acceptable for a club like Norwich, who've spent a lot of money at this level, and fans expect, and the club decision makers expect, for them to be competing in the top 6, and for a quarter of this season they've been competing in the bottom 3, and ultimately that's what's cost Johannes' job. So a shock, a surprise, but with failure comes new opportunity, and I'm excited for what's ahead. I think there's still good people around this football club. There is money around this football club now, and there will be an expectation that next season has to be much better, because another season of transition simply won't be accepted. So it needs to change, and time will tell if it does. Thank you very much for watching. Lots of content coming out this week. Let me know now that 24 hours on, not even, from the news. How are you feeling about the news and Jack Wilshere taking charge for the immediate future? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you to all of our partners, and I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye.